All right, this is the Straight Red Card, and today we are happy to have with us a man who needs a little introduction, World Football Daily's Stephen Cohen. Stephen, thanks for joining us this evening.
It's my pleasure. Thanks very much for asking.
You know, we saw you recently, just to kind of kick things off with something light and fluffy, with a lovely picture with Mr. David Beckham in your arms. Now, how did that actually come to be?
Well, I was covering the game where he came back, the one against, I believe, the Columbus Crew, where he came up. They were up 3-0. But he came on with about 20 minutes to go, and we all, after the game, after the press conference, we all bound into the locker room, and everyone's surrounding him, blah blah blah, and asking him questions. And as he was leaving, I sort of just approached him as he was about to make a right out of the Home Depot Center. See if I could get a picture, and he was most welcoming.
He's a gracious man, I guess, is the bottom line, huh?
He's a gracious man, and he's very, very media savvy. I mean, I did this in front of, there was a barrier in front of us, and there were a lot of people there. So I think it was unlikely that at that particular moment he was going to say, "No, mate, I've got to go." That said, it shouldn't be laughed at. He apparently is incredibly gracious with the media, and I found him to be just that. The other thing is, from the perspective of someone like Beckham, who grew up playing in England and then at times in Italy and Spain. They are not used to the whole thing about people coming into the locker room. The locker room in the Premier League and leagues around the world is their inner sanctuary, and nobody comes in. And so it's quite interesting watching him sort of operate in that environment.
But it's safe to say you guys won't be having lunch together anytime soon. Or is it?
I highly doubt it.
All right, fair enough. But we'll get to the serious stuff now, because we got plenty of it to talk about. We have the U.S. Poland friendly coming up next week, and we do now. It just came out, an hour ago, Brett? The list of the folks that are going to be called up by the U.S. team. So hopefully that's not too big of a surprise. You may have already seen it, Stephen, but
I think you guys just sent it to me.
I did before we started. Yeah.
Well, that's nice of us. So we didn't spring anything on you, but all the folks that Bob Bradley's going to call up, and this is nice. But before we get to the potential players, let's consider this for a second. Should Bob Bradley have been called up again, if you will, for the next coming years? And what do you make of the so-called, quote, mess that the USSF and Gulati may have made with during the Klinsmann interview, according to Klinsmann?
And let's be fair, that's the only side we've had of it. And in some respects, USSF for being quiet about it. Typically, I suppose if they are being quiet, they've probably got something that they don't want shared. Fair enough, that's their business. And my attitude has changed about people who choose not to make comments and stuff like that. I think it's fundamentally they're right. Regarding and from Gulati's perspective, to talk about Jurgen Klinsmann and the process now is of no use and of no point, and it demeans Bob Bradley. Do I think Bob Bradley should have come back? You know what? I do. I don't think he's done anything to not warrant coming back. Did he make some personnel changes during the World Cup that I thought were poor, playing Ricardo Clark instead of Maurice in the Ghana game? Yeah, no question about it. But let's take stock, if we will, or if we could, as to what he accomplished. And I think it shouldn't be trivialized that they got to the final of the Confederations Cup last year. They beat Spain, who at the time, I believe, hadn't lost in some considerable time, and they would 2-0 up against Brazil. He obviously can motivate players. They obviously will play for him. And I think that the U.S. squad seems to be a reasonably harmonious place to be. I think when you also look at some of the younger talent that's coming through, Charlie Davies to still come back, I don't think the U.S. is in a bad position. But ultimately, I think that there was no choice but to bring him back, unless you could really justify not bringing him back. And the only way to justify that would have been to have somebody who really was a big name, who people would run through walls to play for. And, maybe Klinsmann was that guy. I'm not convinced. His time at Bayern Munich is less than stellar.
Right.
His time with Germany, all right, they had the World Cup in Germany. But everybody says that, quite frankly, it was Jogi Löw who got that team ticking. So I'm not so sure that Jurgen Klinsmann was the guy we should have all been salivating over so much. Also, remember, the situation in 2010 is different from the situation in 2006. In 2006, the US had been an utter disaster at the World Cup after 2002 when they were quarterfinalists. Right. This time, the US weren't taken for granted. They came out slowly in some games, gave us one of the great American sporting moments of all time. Let's be honest, it's right up there with the miracle on ice, and do you believe in miracles and stuff like that?
Right.
Maybe not as profound, but huge in its own right. So no, unless you were going to bring in someone like a Gus Hiddink, a Jose Mourinho, or someone of that ilk, I don't see why Bob Bradley shouldn't have stayed.
So is it beyond the pale, or are we testing the limits when we've all heard all the rumors floating around the last week about Dan Flynn, the CEO of USSF, and that he's kind of the behind-the-scenes guy pulling the strings, and that he may or may not have, had the ultimate choice and decision in deciding whether or not they're going to put Klinsmann's responsibilities down on paper and have Klinsmann sign it, whether or not he's the right choice or not. But, I mean, do we know enough about this international man of mystery, Mr. Dan Flynn?
No, I don't think we do. And to be honest, I don't think we know enough about really what took place with Klinsmann. I mean, my sense was in 2006, his demands were ridiculous.
Yep.
That he wanted control, not just on the footballing side, but on the sponsorship and a lot of things that it made absolutely no sense to be involved with. The other thing with Klinsmann, as far as I'm concerned, is the authority that he needed, and I'm not sure that that's been explained by anybody other than Jurgen Klinsmann. Look, he's a football manager. Right. Okay, he should have the right to call in who he wants when he wants, as long as it's a FIFA day and he's not asking clubs to release players when they don't need to. So I'm not really convinced or sure as to what this great level of authority was that he needed. And in some respects, I've been massively critical of the United States Soccer Federation for a long, long time. But there are sometimes when I stand up and I say, you know what, maybe they've got the right to run their business as they see fit. And maybe he wasn't just as glaringly the right candidate as we would like to believe.
Right. I mean, he had, obviously, he's been living in the States a long time. But, okay, beyond that,
he speaks English.
Right. He speaks English. That's a real positive.